Good afternoon. My name is Jerry. I'm from DASYD Do as Yeshua did, here in Alberta, Canada. I hope the following teaching will help somebody better understand the living word in regards to what happens when we die. What are the heavens? What's the lake of fire? Hell. I am following the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, whose name is Yahweh and Yeshua. This is what has been revealed to me. Hopefully it will help somebody understand better what happens when we die. The big question. It seems, there's an old cliche about everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die to themselves to get there. In order to understand what happens when you die, you first have to understand about heaven, lake of fire, etc. What are the heavens? Where are they? Although most people believe that there's a heaven, few people understand what heaven entails. Most people have been seriously misled in regards to what the place called heaven is all about. In the following teaching, I will describe what heaven is, as per our Bible, and what the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, has revealed to me. I must explain that in the universe, there are three distinct separate places described as heavens according to our Bible. These three will exist until Yeshua returns in the clouds 3.5 years into the tribulation. Once the saints are removed from the earth, these three will still exist till the end of the book. After the saints are removed, Exodus part 2, from planet Earth, the two final heavens will be revealed. They are described as the new heaven on the new earth and the new Jerusalem, which is separate from the newly formed earth. Those elect who did as Yeshua did will take up residence in the new Jerusalem. Though heaven on earth will be a beautiful place, it will not in any way compare to the new Jerusalem. There are three heavens talked about in our scriptures. The first heaven is what is commonly called Hades, which is divided in two. The souls and spirits of the saved are on one side, and the souls of the spirits of the unsaved are on the other side. You might call it a staging point until Yeshua returns in the clouds. The second heaven is the new heaven that is described in the first part of Revelation 21, 1-2. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the heavenly expanses, first heaven is in error, in brackets, and the first earth passed away, and there is no longer any sea. So I made a correction there. It should say, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the heavenly expanses and the first earth passed away, and there is no longer any sea. When the earth turns into the lake of fire, there comes a new heaven and a new Jerusalem. The third heaven is beyond what we can see. This is where the New Jerusalem is, where Yahweh and Yeshua exist. 2 Corinthians 12:2. I know a man in Messiah who 14 years ago, whether in the body, I do not know, or out of the body, I do not know. Yahweh knows such a man was caught up to the third heaven. Paul was actually talking about himself in this verse. This was his own experience. Paul was taken up in the Spirit, similar to John when he wrote the book of Revelation, to the New Jerusalem. John 14:2-3. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were so, I would have told you, for I go to prepare a place for you. Now, many wishful thinkers think of this verse as a verse to stand on in regards to all saints will have a special place in heaven. This verse is describing only the New Jerusalem. Only the elect believers will enter there. Revelation 19:11. And I saw heaven opened, and behold a white horse, and he who sat on it called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges the way and wages war. Please note the word heaven, heavens and heavenly, when used in our Bible, can also be describing the skies above us, the heavenly expanse, the expanse that we see when we look up. Heaven and water, as a matter of fact, are the exact same words, Shemim and Shem in Hebrew. The context must be kept intact when coming across these scriptures. Heaven is definitely up. The Bible says Yeshua came down from heaven. It also says he ascended into heaven, John 6:38. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me, John 6:51. I am the living bread that came down out of heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread also which I give for the life of the world is in my flesh. Acts 1:9. And after he had said these things, he was lifted up while they were looking on, and a cloud received him out of their sight. In Ephesians 4:10, it says, he who descended is the very one ascended higher than all the heavens in order to fill the whole universe. The words all the heavens here means more than one. In the parable of the talents, left with 3 slaves in Matthew 25:14-30, Yeshua made it clear that all believers are given some talents. What we do with those talents will determine where we go and what we receive in which heaven. Astronomers agree that there is a great empty space in the north, in the nebula of the great constellation of Orion. Many believe that there is a heavenly cavern there, so gigantic that the mind cannot comprehend it. Astronomers agree that this big hole, approximately 16,740,000,000,000 miles across, now compared to the diameter around the Earth's orbit being 160 million miles, is where heaven is. This huge opening is 90,000 times the size of the Earth's orbital diameter. In other words, there could be 30 solar systems like ours, including the sun, in the opening of this great hole in space. When astronomers view this area, some say there seems to be something spectacular there, something special, a great awe and supernatural presence. Job 26:7. He stretches out the north over empty space and hangs the earth on nothing. Abraham's bosom, Sheol, often called. Abraham's bosom was the name of the place where the souls and spirits of the dead went at the time of the Old Testament. Abraham's bosom is a synonym for life hereafter. It was a place, staging area, where all souls and spirits went after death, prior to Yeshua's resurrection. The believers' souls and spirits couldn't go to Hades because their sins were only covered, not taken away, until Yeshua died on the stake. After Yeshua died, he descended into Abraham's bosom, where he picked up all those departed and then ascended into Hades with them. Luke 16:22-23, 2 Corinthians 12, and Ephesians 5:8. When Yeshua ascended into heaven, he went into Abraham's bosom and removed all the souls and spirits of those who were resting there and took them to the new staging area called Hades. When Yeshua was talking to Nicodemus, he explained that no man other than Yeshua had yet ascended to heaven. They were all in Abraham's bosom at that time. Job presents us with some unusual thoughts about Sheol, Abraham's bosom, in Job 14:10-14. But man dies and lies prostrate. Man expires, and where is he? As water evaporates from the sea, and a river becomes parched and dried up, so man lies down and does not rise, until the heavens be no more. He will not awake, nor be aroused out of his sleep. O that thou wouldst hide me in Sheol, that thou wouldst conceal me until thy wrath returns to thee, that thou wouldst set a limit for me and remember me. If a man dies, will he live again? All the days of my struggle, I will wait until my change comes. Hades. Hades is a place where, since Calvary, all the souls and the spirits of the dead go immediately after death. It is also referred to as the first heaven. You might say it is a staging area until Yeshua comes back in the clouds. The main separation there is between the souls and spirits of saved people as compared to the unsaved. The angel of Hades manages the place Hades. I would like to make a clarification regarding hell and the lake of fire. Hades is the immediate state or place a person's spirit and soul go after death. Hades is divided into two, one side for the saved and one side for the unbelievers. The lake of fire is commonly referred to as Gehenna in Greek. Gehenna is a term that was derived from the burning garbage pits located outside of Jerusalem. Messiah symbolically referred to the Gehenna as eternal torment and separation from Yahweh. Always remember that everything spiritual Yeshua points out to us first in the physical. Yeshua was using Gehenna as a physical example of what would happen spiritually. Revelation 20:11 indicates that death and Hades will be thrown into the lake of fire. The fact that Hades is thrown into the lake of fire proves that there are two different places. Hell is a place of torment. As a place of torment is just as much a reality as heaven. But people do not want to hear or talk about hell. Most unbelievers live in a semi-quasi denial about the existence of hell. They also think that if there's a hell, then it is only reserved for people like Hitler and Charles Manson, etc. I've often wondered when Yeshua or when Yah planned to have the earth become the lake of fire. Did he plan it after the fall of man, or was it part of his original creation? Yah may have built in the earth the ability to become the lake of fire as an eternal punishment before sin even entered the world. Who knows? How do you respond to this question? How can a loving Yahweh send a person to hell? The answer to this question is related to your position of free will. We all have free will. A person sends themselves to hell by rejecting Messiah. It's that simple. I do not think our simple little minds can even comprehend two concepts like eternity and hell. We have the right to choose. Yah will never go against our will. We choose to follow him or go to hell. It's that simple. What is the criteria for judgment at the great white throne? Judgment will be based on what we have done, our deeds. What we've done was ultimately reject or accept Messiah and the free gift of salvation. Revelation 20:12 or 20:15 says that those whose names are not written in the book of life will be cast into the lake of fire. Their deeds confirm which way they decided to go. What you do is going to be used to reward you. Did you do good? Did you follow his word or not? It's that simple. On the saved side of Hades, one section of the saved side of Hades contains all those who have been born again. A second area is where the souls and spirits of unborn children are. This includes all fetuses that were killed by the use of birth control, stillborn babies, and all aborted babies. Now, a point to remember here, the moment blood is formed in the womb, a spirit and soul are formed, a person. Zechariah 8:5. There's another section for the souls and spirits of altars, insiders, that accepted Yeshua as their Messiah. Now, to understand this properly, one needs to understand what MPD or DID, multiple personality disorder, is. This is a very common spiritual survival technique provided for us by Adonai that when we are confronted with serious trauma or terror, he helps us. I can't get into explaining about that right now because most people just can't quite get it. But there is a special place in Hades specifically for altars. There's no communication between the saved side of Hades and earth, other than through Yahweh. There is a great gulf in between, as explained in Luke 16:19-26. When in heaven, we will not be bothered by the thoughts of lost loved ones, family, and friends. Adonai will not allow us to feel that type of discomfort. When the great prophet Isaiah spoke of the last days and the new earth, the Holy Spirit had revealed to him things that would occur in the new kingdom of Hashem. Isaiah 65:17. For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth. and the former things shall be remembered or come to mind. Shall not be remembered or come to mind. Isaiah 65:19. I will also rejoice in Jerusalem and be glad in my people, and there will no longer be heard in her the voice of weeping and the sound of crying. Then John is told what it will be like in the new world. Revelation 21:4. And he shall wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall no longer be any death. There shall no longer be any mourning or crying or pain. The first things have passed away. On the unsaved side of Hades, that's where all the souls and spirits of secular people are, in a state of torment, you might say, a stagnant state, where time stands still. Here the souls and spirits wait for Judgment Day, so they can formally be cast into the lake of fire with Satan and his fallen angels. The Great White Throne Judgment, Revelation 20:11-15. On Judgment Day we will be judged by Yeshua according to our level of moral knowledge and according to the morals of that time period in which we died. John 5:22-23, 26-27. Each person will be judged according to the measure of moral light and understanding made available to him. Those who have a full knowledge of Yahweh's moral standards revealed to them through the law of Moses will be judged by that law. But those who did not have the fuller revelation of the law of Moses will not be judged by that law, but in accordance with the general revelation of Yahweh granted to the human race as a whole through the wonders of creation. Luke 12:48. For everyone to whom much is given, from him much will be required, and to whom much has been committed, of him they will ask the more. Those who receive special revelation through Yahweh's word will be judged by higher standards of moral knowledge. Matthew 12:11-20-24. The lake of fire. The lake of fire will be the earth after Yah finishes dealing with the people on the earth, after the millennial reign and Satan's short period. The earth has a built-in mechanism to burn for eternity. When Dad created the earth, he must have designed it so that from its innermost there will come fire and brimstone to burn for eternity. Those who don't have their names written in the Lamb's Book of Life, Satan and all his secret agents, will end up together for eternity. And that's a long, long time. Isaiah 24:20b. The earth will be turned into a burning mass. 2 Peter 3:10. Then the heavens will pass away with a terrible noise, and everything in them will disappear in a fire, and the earth and everything on it will be destroyed. Zephaniah 3:8. All the earth will be devoured by the fire of my jealousy. Hebrews 1:10-11. You, Yahweh, in the beginning created the earth, and with your own hands you made the heavens. They will disappear, but you will remain. Where is the eternal lake of fire? Well, the earth as we know it will become a fiery planet for eternity. This is the lake of fire spoken of throughout our Bible. After all of humanity has been judged and the saints have been sent to their appropriate place, the unbelievers will be left on the earth to burn for eternity. Satan will be bound forever in the abyss on the eternally burning earth. How many books are there? Well, there's at least 3 that are noted. The Lamb's Book of Life is the main book with the names of all believers in it. Then we have multiple books, at least 2, that contain our deeds. Daniel 7:10, 12:1, and Revelation 21:27. Revelation 20:13. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead which were in them, and they were judged, every one of them according to their deeds. Revelation 20:14. And death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. Revelation 20:15. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Heaven on the new earth and the new Jerusalem compared. Most believers have no idea what heaven on the new earth will be like. When I say new earth, I guess you might call it a new planet. I don't know how best to describe it, but it will be like a planet, but it will be the new earth, which will become the heaven. I'll do my best to describe it. First of all, remember that there are two heavens available for eternity. Two heavens. The lesser heaven, the kingdom, will be on the new earth. The greater, of course, will be the new Jerusalem. The two are not comparable. The new Jerusalem is far superior to heaven on earth. No one can say absolutely who is saved and who isn't. But putting it bluntly, those born-again believers who truly invited Yeshua, even if they ignorantly used the wrong name of Jesus, into their heart verbally, and in faith were obedient to his word, will abide in the new earth heaven. This will take place as long as they were babes, when they did so. Some of you, or some of those, you might say typical Christians, who honestly think they love Yahweh and Yeshua, but never did what he said to do in his word, may be there. Some of them may be there. But the vast majority of the so-called Sunday-type Christians will certainly not. Some of them, because of Yahweh's grace, get into heaven by the skin of their teeth. Every case, of course, is individual. But when he said, "Follow me," he really did mean it. When he said, "If you love me, keep my commandments," he really did mean it. He had a reason for that. The others are what the Bible calls the elect. The elect will go to the New Jerusalem. The following verse has caused much confusion throughout Christendom because the pastors, leaders, and preachers have not properly understood it. This verse is one example of why many clergy will never see the gates of the New Jerusalem. Let's have a look at it. Matthew 5:17-20. So many of us have heard this, talked about, and yet they just don't get it. The problem is they stop after the first three words. Do not think. Sorry, but I just had to throw that in. So let's have a look. Matthew 5:17-20. Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth have passed away, not even the smallest letter or stroke shall pass from the law until it is all accomplished. Whoever then annuls one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever keeps and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I say to you, that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, in these verses, it talks clearly about the least in the kingdom of heaven compared to great in the kingdom of heaven. Many clergy have failed this test and will never see the pearly gates of New Jerusalem because they have failed to lead people in the truth. This has happened mostly because they themselves don't know the truth. How can a preacher tell others the truth when he doesn't know the truth? It's like someone with a cigarette smoking telling you not to smoke. For lay people, this may be considered excusable. But for those who claim to be shepherds, and let's face it, they're getting paid for it. It's business. Biggest business in the world is religion. They're CEOs of their religious sect. Let's face it. Of those who are given much, much is expected. But for those who are given lots and give nothing, well, back they will pay. Malachi states it well in Malachi 2:7-9. For the lips of a priest should preserve knowledge, and men should seek instruction from his mouth. For he is the messenger of Yahweh of hosts. But as for you, you have turned aside from the way. You have caused many to stumble by the instruction. You have corrupted the covenant of Levi, says Yahweh of hosts. So I also have made you despised and abased before all the people, just as you are not keeping my ways, but are showing partiality in instruction. It is simply unacceptable for clergy to lead their sheep into confusion, which most have done. From those who have been given much, much is expected. Anyways, now that you're beginning to understand the difference between the two heavens, I'll explain how the heavens compare. The simplest way to compare the two heavens would be like comparing an 8-inch mono black and white TV to a flat screen 61-inch high definition digital 3D color picture on a stereo television. If you take all the beauty of heaven on earth and magnify it in every way, you will get some idea of how they compare. The splendor of the New Jerusalem cannot be effectively described in any language known to man. I'll attempt to do the best I can in following. The citizens in heaven will all be clothed in white robes. The mansions on a hill that most saints have heard about are in the New Jerusalem only. There are houses, structures there in the earthly heaven. There's no need, however, for shelter because there is no weather in heaven. It is very warm temperature all the time. There are no shadows in heaven because Yah's glory, Shekinah, is everywhere. There are no meeting places such as churches in heaven. The temple of Yah is in the New Jerusalem. So we are in the building. We are the assembly of the people. Those who are in the New Jerusalem, they are the assembly of the people. Those on the new earth will not be in direct presence of the Most High, as many assume. There will be no oceans or bodies of water on earth or in the New Jerusalem, other than the river of living water of the Holy Spirit, with tributaries everywhere. This clear water feels like satin slipping through your fingers when it is poured out over your hands. People in heaven will look similar to what they look like on earth, except their features will be glorified. They will have spiritual, celestial type bodies that will be as recognizable as on earth, as they were before the end of time on earth. On earth we have physical bodies, but in heaven we will have terrestrial or celestial spiritual bodies. We will be able to walk through objects, for example, like Yeshua did. 1 Corinthians 15:5, 40 and 44. Regardless of what age one was when they died, there will be only two noticeable age groups in either heaven. Those under the age of accountability and those over the age of 13. All will look glorious and pure and no spots or blemishes. There's no time in heaven. Yah is time. The only reason time exists is when one is away from Yah. He is like the center hub of a wheel. Time only exists when you get away from the center. People will eat the 12 fruits of the trees of life. People will drink wine made by Yah himself. Flowers, trees, grass, etc. will exist in the physical state. You will be able to feel and touch them, but they will be incredibly beautiful in their essence, color and fragrance. I would best describe it as electric colors, perfect in every way. There are trolley, bus-type vehicles on a type of rail that will transport people rapidly wherever they go. You might call it a light transit rail system without tracks. There will be no sin possible in heaven. There will be no diseases of any kind in heaven, although there may be slight variations in regards to how we feel. All the great holy men and women of the biblical stories that most of us are familiar with will exist in the New Jerusalem only. They will be able to visit with those on the new heaven earth at their will, but will not live there. Altars, insiders, what I like to call them, will exist, each one in their own body, as they depicted themselves when they were in the body of the host person of the old earth. We're talking about MPD, of course. Aborted babies and those who died because of birth control will take on the features of the male and female partners whose seed they came from. All those children under the age of 13 who died will look as if they were grown up. Angels will be everywhere to help us with whatever our heart desires. We will dance, eat, and celebrate with the angels. We will not have any memories of our past life when we are in heaven. The Torah will be our guide in heaven, as it was supposed to be on earth, but wasn't in most cases. The Torah was the mark or the target to aim for, and will continue to be our target of perfection. The Torah will be on our heart, automatically followed. The book of Revelation clearly talks about us being judged by our deeds. In heaven, we will have seniority according to our deeds on earth. We were to store up our treasures in heaven, the good book said. That's why few will make it into the New Jerusalem. When Yeshua spoke of the gate of heaven being narrow, he was referring to the New Jerusalem. We will have received from 1 to 6 crowns before we entered heaven, according to our holiness, our deeds on earth. Our status in heaven will be the result of our works on earth. Now let's look at the New Jerusalem, described in Revelation 20 and 21 and 22. The New Jerusalem is the shape of a cube, 1,400 miles cubed. The walls are broad and high, with 12 gates guarded by 12 angels, and the names of the 12 tribes of Israel are written on the gates. There are 3 gates on each side. The walls of the city, 216 feet thick, have 12 foundations, layers of precious stones and jewels. They are jasper, sapphire, agate, emerald, onyx, carnelian, chrysolite, beryl, topaz, chrysoprase, jacinth, and amethyst. The 12 gates are made of pearls, each gate from a single pearl. The main street is of pure gold, clear as glass. There is a temple in the city. Well, in New Jerusalem, the whole place is what you might call a temple, with walls around it. There is no moon or sun. The glory of Yah illuminates the city. There will be no night, and the gates will never close. Nothing evil will ever be allowed in. No one who practices shameful idolatry and dishonesty, but only those elect whose names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life. The main street has a clear, pure river running down the center, and on each side there will be trees of life bearing 12 different fruits. What's the significance of the pearly gates? Well, heaven is entered through suffering, through redemption, through blood, and the agony of the stake. A pearl, when you think about it, is a beautiful jewel that is formed by the suffering caused by the irritation of a wound of a little animal. Without the wound, the jewel would never have been formed. We, as believers, are the jewels on the crown of the King of Kings and the Master of Masters. We suffered persecution to get into the New Jerusalem. That is why we enter heaven through gates of pearl. Many people get confused about the passage in the book of John 14, 1-2. Do not let your heart be troubled. Believe in Yahweh. Believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you. But for I go to prepare a place for you. Again, this is referring to the New Jerusalem only. The New Jerusalem, as per Revelation 21 and 22, will hover above the earth for 1,000 years after Yeshua returns, until the devil is destroyed in the earth, and it becomes the lake of fire. A new earth with no oceans will appear, and the new heaven, New Jerusalem, will hover above the new earth for eternity. At the time of the millennial reign, the elect saints will live in the New Jerusalem, which will hover above the earth. The secular people will live on the earth. These people will live in poverty and terrible conditions on the earth. They will suffer greatly because they refuse to accept Yeshua. They will be abundant. Their life on earth will be absolutely horrible. Now, some interesting notes about heavens and things associated with them. Yeshua was the first one to go to heaven. That's one of the reasons why he is called the first fruit. 1 Corinthians 15:20. but now Messiah has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who are asleep. John 3:13. And no one has ascended into heaven but he who descended from heaven, even the Son of Man. The elect will be allowed to have animals if they so desire in the New Jerusalem heaven. The animals in heaven will be like the original ones Yah created in the Garden of Eden before they became unclean. We will communicate telepathically in heaven. Luke 8:17. Adonai tells us that our souls belong to him. Ezekiel 18:4. Behold, all souls are mine. The soul of the Father as well as the soul of the Son is mine. The soul who sins will die. When innocent people and children die, we fail to understand why this happens. In Isaiah 57:1-2, it explains, the righteous man perishes and no one takes it to heart, and devout men are taken away while no one understands. For the righteous man is taken away from evil. He enters into peace. They rest in their beds. Something to consider. There is no recognition of marriage in heaven, so it doesn't matter how many husbands or wives one had on earth, no marriage will take place in heaven. Mark 12:25. Neither flesh nor blood, our old nature, in other words, can go to heaven. 1 Corinthians 15:50. There are 3 sets of books in heaven. One is the book of life, which contains the names of all people who are born again and remain true, and the others contain everything that everyone has ever said and done. The phrase seventh heaven should never be used by believers. It actually comes from the Quran. And any born again person, we wouldn't want to have anything to do with the Roman Catholic, Islam, or the Quran. People in heaven will not feel bad about their friends and relatives because they won't know they are in hell. There can be no grief or sorrow in heaven because they know that Yahweh has been totally fair to everyone and that everyone has had the same opportunity to be saved. 1 John 3:2 and Revelation 21:4. 2 Peter 3:12. You should look forward to that day and hurry it along, the day when Yahweh will set the heavens on fire and the elements will melt away in the flames. But we are looking forward to a new heaven and a new earth he has promised, a world where everyone is right with Yah. Yeshua spoke twice as much about hell than heaven in the New Testament. Interesting note. John Newton, a very famous hymn songwriter, once said he expects to see 3 things in heaven. 1, people he didn't think he would see. 2, to not see people expected to see. And 3, to find himself there. In the end, if we're in heaven, we will be as humans were created originally in the garden. We will be both male and female. We will not have both male and female parts, but we will be like at the beginning of time. Individuals will be noticeably male or female, but won't have reproductive organs. That is why it says there is no need for marriage or companionship in heaven. Matthew 22:30. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. In Hebrew, woman means out of man. Adam means from the earth. In the Garden of Eden, when Adam was made in the image of Yah, Eve was in Adam. When Yah created man, he had both sexes in him. When Yah made woman, he took a rib out of Adam. There is a void between the 2 heavens that only those in the New Jerusalem can penetrate with Yah's permission. All citizens will be able to speak and comprehend, communicate in all languages known to mankind if they desire to do so. There will be no further need to speak in tongues in heaven. The kingdom of Yahweh, the kingdom of heaven, and the kingdom mentioned in the Bible all mean the same thing. The kingdom of Yahweh is mentioned, by the way, over 70 times in the New Testament, but the kingdom of heaven is only used in the Gospel of Matthew. So there's some interesting things associated with the new heavens. What happens when you get to the new earthly heaven? When a believer goes to his or her eternal resting place, he or she will receive as many as 6 crowns for their head. These crowns will be presented according to what you did, your deeds, and how well you did them. The 6 crowns are the crown of righteousness, 2 Timothy 4:8. The crown of life for enduring trials, martyr's crown, James 1:12. The crown of glory, or elder's crown, 1 Peter 5:2-4. The crown of faithfulness, winner's crown, Revelation 2:10. The crown of exaltation, the victor's crown, 1 Thessalonians 2:19. The crown to master our old nature, or soul winner's crown, 1 Corinthians 9:25. Now, what is death? What happens when you die? Well, Ezekiel tells us that Yah doesn't want anyone to die. Number 1, Ezekiel 18:32. For I have no pleasure in the death of anyone who dies, declares Yahweh Elohim. Therefore, repent and live. Now, I define death as the absence of life. Like black is the absence of light, death is the absence of life. The number 1 tool of Satan is to cause death. His ultimate goal is for all of us to die. When Yeshua came and resurrected, he took Satan's number 1 weapon and removed it for those who are born again. Death has no power over someone who is born again, because we are not of this world. Our kingdom is above. Death cannot destroy us, no matter what happens. Genesis 2:16b-17. You may freely eat from every tree in the garden except the tree of knowledge of good and evil. You are not to eat from it, because on that day you eat from it, it will become certain that you will die. Yah, in his divine omniscience, ultimately knew that mankind would disobey and would die spiritually, morally, and physically. He knew that. Genesis 3:19. You will eat bread by the sweat of your forehead till you return to the ground, for you were taken out of it, you are dust, and you will return to dust. Death is part of the cycle of life. Everything returns back to its original state. Mankind has denied and tried to elude death, but has never succeeded and never will succeed. The Torah speaks of death in a unique way. Genesis 25:8. Then Abraham breathed his last, dying at a ripe old age, an old man full of years, and he was gathered to his people. Death was viewed as the transition of being gathered to your people. The process of this transition was when one breathed one's last breath. Genesis 35:28-29 says, Isaac lived to be 180 years old. Then he breathed his last, died, and was gathered to his people. Genesis 49:33 says, when Yaakov had finished charging his sons, he drew his legs up under his bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. The Brit Hadashah, the Renewed Testament, also addresses the topic of death and dying. Hebrews 9:27 says, just as human beings have to die once, but after this comes judgment. It is appointed unto man to die. Death is the unavoidable. Paul says in Philippians 1:21, for to me life is the Messiah and death is gain. Whatever we do, whether we love or die, we do it unto Yahweh. Romans 14:8. Our hope as believers in Messiah is in the fact that we will be raised, resurrected from the dead. 1 Corinthians 15:54-55 says, when what decays puts on imperishability and what is mortal puts on immortality, then this passage in the Tanakh will be fulfilled. Death is swallowed up in victory, and death, where is your victory? Death, where is your sting? The Tanakh, or Old Testament as most call it, doesn't really define any doctrine of an afterlife. Rather, it hints at such a reality throughout the body of its text. Some Jews in both the first century as well as today do not believe in the afterlife. Most Gentiles, or Goyim, do believe that there will be an existence beyond that of this flesh. In the time of the first century, when Yeshua walked the earth, those who believed in an afterlife held to the thought that after you departed from this life, you were gathered to your fathers in a place known as the Bosom of Abraham, or Gan Eden, paradise. This belief is similar to and may have been influenced by ancient Greeks who held a similar belief, who influenced who I don't know. Who knows which idea came first? But Jewish thought was not immune from Hellenistic philosophy, and neither was being a saint. Let's have a look at what Paul said happens when we die. 2 Corinthians 5, 1-2. He described it well. For we know that if the earthly tent, which is our house, is torn down, we have a building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens. For indeed, in this house we groan, longing to be clothed with our dwelling from heaven. Here we see Paul talking about what happens when believers and followers of Yeshua die. He's using a tent as symbolic of our earthly body. When we die, our earthly temporary tent disappears, and we move on towards our permanent heavenly house or building, which will be for eternity. As long as we dwell on earth, everything is temporary. In the end, we will live eternally in his house, not made with hands. Remember the verse about not made with hands? The whole idea of the Feast of Sukkot is that we use a temporary structure to cover ourselves during the feast. This booth, tabernacle, human tent, is symbolic of our temporary home on earth. It's just another incredible thematic connection. Many people have been confused by the scripture in Luke 23:43, where it appears the two thieves crucified with Yeshua go directly to heaven. Luke 23:43. And he said to him, "Truly I say to you, today you shall be with me in paradise." The comma is in the wrong place in this verse. Another example of a bad translation. If you put the comma after the word today, it all makes sense. It should read as follows. Truly, I say to you today, you shall be with me in paradise. Because of this error, many have used this verse to back up the foolish idea that we go to heaven the moment we die. This is absolute hogwash. What happens when you die? Well, when a born-again person or a child under the age of 13, which is considered the age of accountability, dies, the death angel comes and escorts the soul and spirit of that individual to Hades. The death angel is accompanied by many divine angels who guide the soul and the spirit through a brilliantly lit wormhole-type tunnel directly to Hades. At the end of the tunnel is the brilliance, Shekinah glory, of the saved side of Hades. There they remain until Yeshua comes back to earth in the clouds. When this happens, the soul and spirit will be accompanied with their newly formed spiritual body. We will look similar to how we look now, except the bodies of his born-again people will be glorified. We will immediately receive a white robe of righteousness. I personally believe that when I shed this mortal body, I shall be ushered to Hades until Yeshua comes back in the clouds. Then into the presence of the Holy One, blessed is he. Where I hope to hear those famous words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Father." When an unsaved person dies, the death angel comes and escorts the soul and spirit of that individual to the torment side of Hades. They will experience going through a black tunnel to Hades. There will be no divine angels escorting them. The last fallen angel that will be thrown into the lake of fire is the angel of death. Revelation 20:14. And death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. 1 Corinthians 15, 24, 26. There will be no more death, so there will be no more need for a death angel. I hope that this has helped you understand a little bit better of what actually happens when we die. Food for thought. Have a great day.